Vamos lá, vídeo de nerfs ou buff?
Thanks for asking.
Vamos ver.
Actually, I really like this question because, yes, there are some buffs coming.
Alguns buffs estão chegando, hein, gente?
Welcome to
Eita!
Fortune
Buff
Eternal,
na
where we talk about
Bacamarte.
all things New World. Today we have an episode of Balance of Power where we'll be discussing balance heading into Season 4 and discussing some of the recent changes. But before we jump into
Vamos ver,
questions,
vamos falar da
I'm gonna address,
quarta temporada.
a hot topic we've been seeing, and that's some of the recent balance changes that came out with the 3.0.3 patch, specifically the changes around shirking heels.
O Curo esquiva,
This
gente,
has been a
ó.
very contentious change, and I think, just to be frank, I think we might have been a little heavy-handed here.
Podemos ter sido pouco pesado, mas estou muito feliz com o ritmo das mudanças. A mudança de equilíbrio. Se você lembrar,
we were much slower, and I think too slow.
era muito mais lento, com certeza, mano.
Too stale. We let things that were too
Hoje em dia o meta tá mudando bem rápido, tá muito bom isso.
I'm happy that we've made improvements there. However, the other aspect of balance changes is the magnitude. So while I'm happy with the pace of changes, I think our magnitude has been a little bit too much. So what I want us to do is start making smaller incremental changes on these, on the minor patches to sort of try to achieve balance. And, just as a reminder...
Galera, a magnitude, que é aquela dos perks de artefato que vai conforme você tem mais força, vai tudo pra força, essas coisas, perk de artefato e nome nomeado, item nomeado, eles vão começar a dar umas mudadas nos patches menores, tá? Pra ficar mais fácil pro pessoal controlar os atributos, porque tem muita gente usando, mas a culpa é das pessoas que estão usando 10 itens com magnitude. Mas eles vão dar uma mudada aí, tá, gente? Porque bastante gente tá pedindo.
And what our goal for balance is that we want balance to mean that all the perks are viable, that they each have sort of equal strength, and just depending on which build you want, that's how you choose what you want. So I want to talk a little bit about the reasoning about why we had the second change to shirking heels, because I think a lot of people are like, it was fixed when we fixed the previous bugs, and I think we were over-indexing. There's still one remaining bug where the way Ankh and Anointed and Sacred Ground worked, it really buffed shirking heels more than we wanted. And we've been very sort of had our eye on the survivability of healers, and I think that led to this change. So two good things. One, that bug is fixed in Season 4. And with that bug fixed and some of the changes in behavior that we're seeing with that minor patch, we are going to bring down the cooldown from the increased 10 seconds down to 7 seconds. So,
a mudança do cura esquiva vai ser de 7. Aí, gente, a mudança do cura esquiva de 10 para 7 segundos, tá? Eu acho que ficou legal. O cura esquiva vai voltar a ser usável de 10 para 7, tá? Acho que vai ficar ser usável sim.
After that in sort of a smaller measured manner. If we deem necessary.
All right, Dave. Well, before we jump into the questions, maybe now is a good time to discuss what are your views overall on healing?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Let's talk sort of like what are our goals and philosophy behind healing. When I think about healing, I think about sort of 4 things. One, I want healing to be strong for healers. I want them to be able to heal their teammates. I want that fantasy of being able to come in and save someone from my team from getting killed or hurt. So that's one thing that's very important. 2, I want there to be counters to healing, right? Rather than just nerf the power of a healing, instead I want to keep it strong, but give people options to be able to counter it. 3, I want being a healer to be somewhat risky, right? Like it is a powerful role, and I'll be frank, in the past, healers have had sort of an insane amount of survivability, and I think that's something we're starting to chip away at, and I want there to be sort of a risk to having all this power. And lastly, from a philosophical standpoint, I also want there to be options for solo people or teams without a heal. And with that, I mean, I want there to be viable paths towards self-sustain. So when I look at that as sort of our overall goals and philosophy around healing, that's, you can see where the 11.14 patch came in, the recent minor was we really wanted to start to create counters towards healing. And those were, one, the buffs to disease on outgoing, and also sort of the ability to apply it more generously with plague strikes and plague crits. So that was one part of the puzzle coming in. The second part is coming in Season 4, where we are making changes to Anointed in Sacred Ground. That will sort of tackle some of the survivability of healers. They won't be able to just, pots won't tackle some of the survivability of healers. They won't be able to just, pots won't be amplified by all survivability of healers. They won't be able to.
Eles não conseguirão, os potes não serão
amplificados. The natural healing. With those changes, with that change made, we can now also remove the 20% we had, the decreased efficiency of pots. And with Circling Heals coming down from 10 seconds to 7 seconds, those two things we also think will tackle the self-sustain. So I think, we...
o pote, o solo sagrado não vai mais buffar o pote, tá, gente? Porque o pote atualmente, hoje o solo sagrado buffa o pote, não vai mais buffar, é isso que ele tá falando. E o cura esquiva também não vai ser mais afetado pelo solo também, tá? É isso que ele tá falando.
Probably won't hit the balance perfectly in season.
E o cura esquiva não vai ser afetado mais pelo colar também.
But I think we are starting to tackle those sort of 4 philosophical points I discussed, and we'll continue to do that. On a longer run basis, we also do want to think about healing, and is it fun, is it active? I think right now a lot of the heals are sort of passive hots, and I think that's less fun than some of the more active weapons we have. So we are looking at that in sort of a longer run, and also sort of seeing can we make some of the other weapons more viable so that there's a little more swapping between weapons and combos between them. So it's something we'll be looking at in the long term.
In 303, you made some nerfs.
Eles estão falando que na quarta temporada eles vão começar a buffar as armas poucas usadas, tá, gente? É isso que ele quis dizer, buffar ou nerfar as armas muito usadas, para tornar combos diferentes mais usáveis. Provavelmente outro nerf na minha Bacamarte, né?
The blunderbuss, and do you think it's in a good spot now?
So we did make some changes. I think we took 2 actions. One, we tried to reduce its survivability by adjusting some of the perks. We also reduced a little bit of its damage by nerfing the primary attack in ASB. So I think we did take some changes. I think some of the recent disease changes have had a byproduct of sort of buffing it. I think overall it's still pretty strong. I think we've got our eye on it. No plan changes yet for Season 4, but it's definitely something that is on the stronger side, and we are keeping our eye on.
All right, in 303, you gutted the range.
Eles estão falando que mesmo com os nerf no dano da Bacamarte, o nerf na rede da Bacamarte, ainda ela está sendo uma boa arma, então eles estão de olho ainda, mas não quer dizer que vai vir nerf logo mais.
Range of splash of light to 25 meters. Why?
Yeah, I think this is another one that I think, we probably went too far too fast. I would have preferred if we had stepped this one down. But the rationale behind it is that 25 meters is the range for all the other healer abilities, and we wanted to sort of create a standardized range. It also works very well with the UX. Teammates become gray after they go out of that range, so it helps people know when they are within range. This ability is also it's got some inherent strong points, right? Like you don't need line of sight, and your teammates don't have to be grouped to get the benefit, which can be really advantageous if you've got some backline and some frontline people. So we think this ability still has a good spot in the game. So I think, no plans to change the distance. And I think if we did see that the ability needed a buff, I think we'd find other ways to buff it and sort of keep the distances consistent.
All right, jumping into PTR.
Eles falam do respingo de luz, que na verdade o respingo de luz é bem chatinho, principalmente no OPR, mano. Porque o respingo de luz, ele literalmente cura o cara muito longe com quem joga de pocket heal. Então eu achei esse nerf para 25 metros muito bom mesmo.
For now, let's start out with the big one. What were you thinking about with Boltcaster?
Yeah, so Boltcaster. Yeah, I think we were a little bit nervous going in with this one. I think we were a little bit nervous going in with this one. I think it is, what we liked about it is it's a very cool and unique passive. The ability to stun someone with a bow is sort of a neat passive, and the way it worked off health was something that we hadn't done before. It was sort of fun. So we thought it would be interesting to try out. We did see it in PTR. We have played it more internally, and I think while it may be fun for the bow user, it is not fun for the recipient. And that's okay in some of our internal testing and solo fights. In big group fights, it proved not to be fun, and it really sort of created an unpleasant experience. So we are going to take action. We are going to remove that perk. We're replacing it with something else. We're replacing it with a perk.
Eu ouvi um amém. Eu ouvi um amém? Eu ouvi um amém? Eles vão tirar um mini stun do arco de artefato, mano. Finalmente.
Perk that for every basic attack you hit someone with, you gain a charge, a lightning charge, so to speak, and at 3 charges, you do a big pop of damage. We like this as, and at 3 charges someone with, you gain a charge, a lightning charge, so to speak, and at 3 charges, you do a...
Tá, mas ainda veio um atributo bem forte. Ainda. Deram mais dano. Eu prefiro o stun.
Big pop of damage.
Não, eu espero que seja na mesma pessoa, porque a arqueira acertar 3 vezes seguida é muito difícil, tá? Tomara que seja na mesma pessoa. Tá ligado? Se for na mesma pessoa, não tem problema, cara. Porque a arqueira acertar 3 hits é demais.
Sort of a direction for the weapon. I think it rewards sort of skill and precision and hitting people versus just, some people with bow may just be spamming AoEs or shooting into a pocket of people, and I think this will reward people who have a little more targeting and skill in their usage. So we're excited to see how this plays out.
What about the gem changes? Any changes to those?
That was another one that was pretty controversial. I think we went out very strong in the PTR, where we made these gems very powerful. They scaled highly off both int and focus. And I think, in the spirit of what I discussed at the start of this, of taking more, that was a little more targeting and skill in their usage. So we're excited to see how this plays out.
What about the gem changes? Any changes to those?
That was another one that was pretty controversial. I think we went out very strong in the PTR, where we made these gems very powerful. They scaled highly off both int and focus. And I think, in the spirit of what I discussed at the start of this, of taking more sort of measured approaches and going a little more in steps, I think we are going to tune this down. We're going to go to 75% scaling on intelligence and 65% on focus. I think that is a good plan.
As gemas de int e de focus que tava dando mais dano, com o vidro vai ser diminuído um pouco a escala, tá, gente? Vai ser diminuída porque tava dando muito dano a mais.
Place to start out. These gems are still really powerful because they allow combinations that otherwise wouldn't be available, and we're going to see how it plays at this level and then may adjust. Another thing to mention is while we were doing this, one of the things we found, and I think we've heard feedback on this and we really looked into it, I think it's accurate, is that the intelligence ATBs are just stronger than a lot of the others. So that was creating a lot of desire to put in these new gems to scale off int even for strength and dex based weapons to get access to the new ATBs. So that is something we're looking at. We are making one change for season 4. The 150 ATB, the elemental damage one, is going down from 15% to 10%.
O dano elemental do 150 de int vai cair de 15 para 10%. Isso daí já é um nerf na Bacamarte, no mago, no mosquete, todo mundo que usa int. É um nerf de 5% no dano aí, elemental.
We'll be looking at them more. I could see us making one more change in the future to the intelligence ATBs to sort of get them in line with the other ones.
All right. How about the flail? How do you think it's doing?
Well, the flail is performing pretty well. In fact, it's over time, it's usage and win rates and damage, well, not damage, but mostly win rates have increased. So I think people are, they're finding out how to incorporate this weapon into their builds, into their team compositions, and it is doing well sort of across the board in all 3 of our PvP modes. We think a lot of this could be due to 2 bugs. There's a bug where the flail currently inherits the reaction of the last weapon that attacked in certain circumstances. We have definitely fixed that issue in Season 4, so that will no longer be happening. There's another bug where you can gain permanently the haste that flail provides. We think we fixed this one. There's a couple different ways that we found to get into this situation, so we think we fixed all of them, but there might be one left that we're unaware of, but we think we fixed that. So what we want to do is see what these 2 bug fixes do to the weapon before we make further changes.
Eu não creio que esses bugs aí é o que está afetando, não.
All right. And what
about atualmente mesmo o que está chato mesmo é
Thanks for asking. Actually, I really like this question
pesado,
because yes, there are some buffs coming, and I think this is another area of just philosophically in terms
Magal é
of
bom suporte, né? Ela tá absurdamente forte pro suporte.
It seems like all our
Então,
balance changes
eu creio que é
are
por
always
isso que tá ajudando.
the
Tanto
most
que na guerra você só vê Magal girando.
Make sure we're doing is sort of watching the
Eu queria que
lower powered weapons
nerfasse o
and
mago,
boosting them
mano.
up so that everything is sort of has a chance. So there are 3 that sort of come off to my mind. One is Endless Thirst. This is the most achieved jewelry artifact, but the one that's least used. So we definitely think this one's a little bit weak. We are making some changes. One, the penalty, how long you have to wait between usages of potions, is going down to 25. There was some confusion here because it was 20% initially in the notes, but it was actually 40%. So when we adjusted those notes to 40% in PTR, I think it drew some, an eye on this. So we have gone down to 25% there, which we think is a good spot relative to the 33% increase in power. And we've also buffed the 2 perks that come with it. So I think that'll be a good change. Koya's Knee Guards is another one that we're taking a look at. This one, I think what we wanted to do is make it a more broadly applicable artifact. So what we're doing...
estão falando que o brinco vai para 25%, vai aumentar o CD da poção para 25%, tá, gente?
Here is, rather than just being one type of range damage, it will now affect all types of range damage, but we're going to slightly bring down the range. Well, I think what we want... Koya's Knee Guards is another one that we're taking a look at. This one, I think what we wanted to do is make it a more broadly applicable artifact. So what we're doing here is, rather than just being one type of range damage, it will now affect all types of range damage, but we're going to slightly bring down the value of that amount to, I think, 10% to balance it out. But I think that'll make this a more generally applicable weapon. I think 10% to balance it out. But I think that'll make this a more generally applicable weapon. I think.
Oh, que da hora. Fala. A calça de artefato, gente, é leve. Ela vai reduzir todos os danos ranged em 10%. Todos os danos, não importa se é mágico ou físico. Então, essa calça vai ser muito forte para o PR, mano.
That seems to be something that players would like. And last is Inferno, our Fire Staff artifact. We are going to be changing the Hellfire perk on this to 15 meters rather than 8 meters. And I think that will sort of give this opportunity for a more, sort of close-in oriented Fire Staff to play.
Okay. Well, I think I'm good on questions.
Awesome. Well, that leads me to the community question. I think the last question is a perfect segue. Let me ask the community, what buffs would you like to see? What do you think is underpowered in our game right now? That's fun, and if you're like, oh, if it
eles deixaram a pergunta, o que você quer que seja bufado, galera?
Let us know in the comments.
Porque eles vão começar na quarta temporada, não assim que sair. Mas depois que sair a quarta temporada, eles vão começar a bufar algumas armas, tá? que não esteja sendo muito jogada.
Well, yeah, and it totally plays into our combat, right? Like we have headshots, they do bonus damage. There's certain abilities where if you shoot in the legs, you get a slow leg. So we take advantage of all this sort of cool stuff.
Yeah, we could totally optimize by just becoming tap target, right?
No. Let's go to the next question. Have headshots.
Right over and stuff.
Well, yeah, and it totally. And with that, we'll see you in a tournament.
Like the skeleton archers when they like duck and you always like shoot right over them and stuff.
Well, yeah, and it totally plays into our combat, right? Like we have headshots, they do bonus damage. There's certain abilities where if you shoot in the legs, you get a slow leg. So we take advantage of all this sort of cool stuff.
Entendi muito bem do que seria. Eu acho que é combate contra IA.
No.
Que eles vão falar.
Let's go to the next question.
Mas é isso, galera. Então já sabemos algumas coisas que vão nerfar e outras coisas que vão buffar, tá, gente? Videozinho dos Devin aí, eu vou deixar o link na descrição, caso você quiser ver. Eu achei da hora, só precisava do nerfzinho no mago, mas eu acho que a calça de artefato vai dar bom, né? Contra mago e o artefato fazendo o mago bater de perto.